Okay, let's begin. We are on Daf Tetvav, page 15. If you want to follow in the art school, it's 15A1. We want to thank, of course, the entire Mr. Mishpaha for hosting our Gemara class on Sunday morning. Okay, let's begin. The Gemara says, on 15A1, Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman taught, Malachi ze Mordechai. This is, by the way, blockbuster. I love when this happens. The Gemara just offhand just shoots out a comment, which is like a game changer, right? But just pretends like it just said nothing. Imagine you're in the courthouse. The guy's like, I would like to just suggest that the person who is the defendant is actually the prosecutor. And moving on. That's what's going on over here, okay? Amar Rav Nachman says, Malachi ze Mordechai. So we have a whole book in Tanakh called Malachi. It's one of the prophets. The Gemara says, Rav Nachman says, oh, you know that book? Yeah, that's Mordechai. Okay, moving on, right? So if his name was Mordechai, if his true name was Mordechai, why is he called Malachi? The Gemara says, he was like the second to the king. So Malachi means like my king. Okay? So that's why they called him Malachi. Now there's a disagreement as to whether or not this Memra was actually said by Rav Nachman or by Rav. Now that might just seem like a little note to you, or it might seem something not so important, but we'll see in a minute why it's actually very important. And why perhaps there's another nusach in the Gemara, another expression in the Gemara that follows different understanding. The Gemara says, Metvei, we ask a question from a Braita. Baruch ben Neriah, Seria bat Mahseah, v'Daniel, u'Mordechai Bilshan, v'Chagai, v'Zachariah, u'Malachi, all seven of these prophets, Kulan nitnabeu b'shnat shnai l'Daryavish, all of them, they said prophecy, they said they came with the Nebuah in the year 2 of Daryavish. Remember, there are two Daryavishes, Darius, one prior to Achashverosh, and one as a descendant of Achashverosh. The second Darius is when they went up to rebuild the temple in actual fact. So all of these seven Nevi'im told the Jewish people, halas, it's time to go, prophecy, time to go to Israel. Tiyufta, the Gemara says, this is Tiyufta, this knocks out the opinion of Nachman. Why? Because it lists Mordechai from Bilshan, and separately in the list it lists Malachi. So they can't be the same person, otherwise it wouldn't list them twice in the same listing. Now, why did I tell you it matters before? There's a famous idea called Rav Tanahu Upalig, which means if I'm a Tana, I'm the Tanaic era. My name is Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. I could argue on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai could argue on Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa could argue on Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar could argue on Rabbi Akiva. They're contemporaries. Same era. Same era. There's a point in time where the Tanaim era ends, and we begin another level called Amoraim. Now that's the next level. That's the marked next level down. At that point, they're no longer contemporaries, and your Torah knowledge was not considered to be as much as the people that came before you. So if someone brought a Mishnah that said the opposite of what you said, and you could not find another Mishnah that said like what you said, that knocked you out. Why? Because you're arguing on a Tanah. However, the Gemara says numerous times in Shas, Rav Tanahu Upalig. Rav was right at the border. Rav's rabbi was Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda the prince. So he lived in that crossover period of the Beit HaMikdash being destroyed, that era. Okay, so Rav was his student. So the first Amorah of the Amoraic generation is his rabbi was a Tana. So the Gemara says many times Rav Tanahu, he's a Tana also, even though he's an Amorah, he's quasi Tana, quasi Amorah.
How did they make
not Quasimodo?
How did they make the distinction? What was the cutoff date?
That was the cutoff date, but people that learned in that era from Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, I always thought that the reason is because Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was the one that arranged the Mishnah. So when they compiled all the writings, that was like the end of an era of everything that came before. Okay? Very similar to what happens later on in the Gemara, where the Gemara is an era that everyone could argue with everybody else. But after the Amoraic era is over, now come the Saboraim, the Geonim. They couldn't argue on the Gemara. Okay? So, if Rav is this quasi, if Rav just told us that Malachi is Mordechai, and then you bring me a Braita that says differently, what would Rav say? He'd thumb his nose at you and say, I can write my own Mishnah. I'm a Tana too. So therefore it makes more sense that this would be said by Rav Nachman if the Gemara considered a Braita that they brought in contradistinction to his opinion to be a knockout punch. Got me? Okay. And we'll see exactly why I'm bringing this up in about 30 seconds.
So I'm sorry. The Rav who is on the border, can he challenge or go up against the Tanakh?
Can Rav go up against the Tana? Yes.
He can.
Yes.
But what about his contemporaries?
No.
No. So he's the cutoff point.
Yeah, there's a question about a couple other people in that exact period, but like, do we say Shemuel about the same thing about Shemuel? It's a discussion of the Rishonim. Okay.
You can only bring another Tanah from that same time period. You can't bring it from a previous time period.
So the Tanakh period stretches. So it really goes the way it goes is you have the Anshe Knesset Gdolah. After the Anshe Knesset Gdolah, the last members of which actually were Mordechai, Ezra, Nehemiah, the ones that came and rebuilt the temple, Anshe Knesset Gdolah, men of the Great Assembly. They were the ones that compiled the Shmona Esrei, the Amidah, the words of our Tefillah come from Anshe Knesset Gdolah. Remember, and some of them were prophets. So that's how we understand that our tefillot were arranged with prophetic ability. Okay?
And that's because the older generations were closer to Hashem.
We're closer to Hashem.
Direct
Correct.
connections.
More direct connections than what we have. Okay? So now the amazing thing about this is, after that you have the Zugot, which means that the Jewish people were led by two leaders, Av Beit Din and the Nasi. Right? So you had the Zugot that I mentioned in Pirkei Avot. Rabbi Yochanan, Yisreda, this one, Yosef ben Yoezet. So the Gemara goes through the pairs. After the pairs, you have the Tanaim. Okay? After the Tanaim, Amoraim. After Amoraim, Savoraim. After Savoraim, Geonim. After the Geonim, Rishonim. So now, what are we? There's a distinction of opinion, by the way. We are Hamor. No, what are we? There's a distinction of opinion. One opinion says we are Acharonim. And one opinion says we are what's called Achare Acharonim. Like the later of the laters. Why? Because right now, if I decided I wanted to argue on, just to give you an understanding of who we're talking about. You know who's an Aharon? The first of the Acharonim. We talked about crossover.
Rambam?
No, he's a Rishon. He's from the Rishonim. Rambam, Rashi, Ritba, Rashba, all of these Rishonim. First of the Aharonim, that kind of switchover, crossover, Rabbi Yosef Karo, Aharon.
Wow.
So the Shulchan Aruch was written by Aharonim. None of us would think, if someone tells you halakha, you're like, what do you mean, Shulchan Aruch? Shulchan Aruch is Aharon. I can't come in and argue with the Shulchan Aruch, even if I was a much bigger Talmid Chacham than I am. You see? So that's why, if it's impossible for me to argue on them, then that would be another category, which would place us as this Ahare Aharonim. So,
Did Rabbi Ovadia Yosef argue with the Shulchan Aruch?
The exact opposite. The Chamovaya Yosef really, in many ways, reinstated the superiority of Maran. He went to the highest level. Can I give you an example of how far he goes with Maran? Just a understanding. Anyone here eat bagel, cream cheese, and lox? Yeah. You do. The Syrian minhag, not to eat it. You know why?
Cheese and fish.
Cheese and fish. Who said you can't eat cheese and fish?
Maridayim.
No, what's maritayim? Cheese and fish I'm allowed to eat. You can't eat cheese and meat.
Can't eat. It goes back to cheese and chicken, because chicken used to be close.
Nobody says that cheese and fish is the same as cheese and chicken. Nobody, not one person. So I want to give you the background of this because it's actually wild. The Gemara talks about mixing fish and meat. You're not allowed to mix fish and meat. You can't mix cheese and meat, or cheese and chicken. You can't mix fish and meat.
You can't?
No.
Ashkenaz have it all.
That's why you ever see this? They ask you if you go to Salt or nice restaurant, they always ask you, should we bring it on a separate plate? Should we bring it later?
Eat fish before the meat.
Before, yes. Not 6 hours. just not together.
Not on the same plate.
Not on the same plate. They don't cook it together in a dish. You can't have turducky with fish in the middle of the thing.
I guess when you go to
Turducken.
Ashkenaz, you have gefilte fish first, and then
On a separate plate.
Always separate. Plate.
Always separate plate. Okay.
Okay.
So fish and meat, you're not allowed to mix. All right. Now listen to this. The Bet Yosef, which is written by the Shulchan Aruch. So that was his commentary on the Torah. So prior to writing the Shulchan Aruch, he wrote a commentary on another prolific halacha sefer called the Torah. And much of what we know about his reasoning and his logic is from the Bet Yosef. Because in the Shulchan Aruch, he just spits facts. This is the halakha. In the Bet Yosef, when he's talking about the Torah, he gives a lot of the logic, the reasoning, the chachamim, where he's coming from. The Bet Yosef writes, you're not allowed to have cheese and fish. And he says, like it says in that Gemara. Go open up that Gemara. What does it say in the Gemara he quotes? As the proof for the fact you can't eat cheese and fish.
Fish and meat.
You can't eat fish and meat.
Because from the same
So
animal.
what does many of the commentators say? It's a printing mistake in the Bet Yosef. The Bet Yosef did not mean to say cheese and fish. And the proof is he quotes a Gemara that's talking about fish and meat, not cheese and fish.
Okay.
Chamovadia says, Kivan sheyatza mipi Maran, if the words came out of the mouth of Maran, if that's how we got them, that's what we do. I mean, you see, that's quite. That's how much Chamovadia. He's everything in Shulchan Aruch for Chamovadia. Okay. Now, what's interesting? I mean, not in 1,000,000%, but almost every case he follows Shulchan Aruch. Now, what's interesting is that subsequently, if you take a look, you'll notice that there are other Aharonim also write about having cheese and fish together. Okay. So you want to have a salmon fettuccine alfredo. Oh. Delicious. He's taking off the plate. He's getting rid of it. He can't have it. I had in London this incredible tuna pave with a peppercorn sauce. I don't know what cheese. I found that had milk in it. Khalas was over. I begged them to make it with soy milk, pistachio milk, almond milk. No, they don't want to do it. All right. So for many Sephardim, they follow this Bet Yosef, and they say that what he meant was he was saying just like the Gemara over there says. You can't have fish and meat, even though it's not the deoraita of cheese and meat. We also forbid cheese and fish. That's what he says. Interestingly enough, the pre-Hadash Ashkenaz posek, because they don't hold that way, right? Most Jewish food in the world is lox, bagel, cream cheese, right? And they don't follow the stereotype, and they don't follow it, right? And yet the pre-Hadash writes that having cheese and fish is not good for a person's health. And he says you could even speak to the doctors and they'll tell you that this is an unhealthy combination. And that's what the Bet Yosef was saying. Fish and meat, we say, is a sakana. To mix fish and meat is a sakana. It's also a dangerous combo for your health. So he says that what the Bet Yosef was saying was you can't have this just like you can't have that. So again, but you see this distinction of errors. So I'm bringing you this because if the Gemara says that the Braita knocks him out, it can't really be Rav then, because why would the Gemara not just say, Rav could argue on that. Okay. But at least for now, we're saying it in the name of Rav Nachman. Tanya, we learned in the Braita about Rabbi Yehoshua ben Kach, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Kach said, Malachi, he's not Mordechai. Malachi is Ezra. Really, it's Ezra. Who's Ezra? If you remember, we mentioned Ezra was one of the men of the Great Assembly. Ezra was the guy who, along with Nehemiah, was the one that rebuilt the temple and rededicated the Jewish people in Eretz Israel after coming back after the story of Purim. Okay? So that whole story of coming back to build the second Beit HaMikdash, of getting the Jews settled in Israel, bringing them back up to the level, that is Ezra and Nehemiah, and he's one of the Anshe Knesset Gdolah. Okay, we also have Takanat Ezra, we have other rules and things that he instituted, he passed that became case law, ya'ani, in the Jewish nation. The Chachamim say, no, Hajj, leave the guy alone. He's not Mordechai, you're giving him double identity, multiple personality disorder. Leave him alone, his name is Malachi, that's it, just Malachi. Malachi is his name, Malachi Shmo, nothing else. Okay? So we have three opinions. One is Malachi is Mordechai, the Gemara knocked that out. Second is Malachi is Ezra, okay? And the third opinion is Malachi is, is just Malachi. Amar Rav Nachman, the Gemara now continues on the Braita. Mistabra kemanda Amar Malachi is Ezra. Sounds to me that the truth is with the one that says that Malachi is actually Ezra. Why? Dichtiv b'neviut malachi. Now, you see my problem.
He's going back on his,
So if this
It
was,
has to be Rav
if the
Nachman.
one before was Rav, this works.
right.
Rav Nachman is saying that I think the other guy's right. If it's Rav, we have a problem that Rav should have just said, well, I disagree on the Braita. So it's an interesting thing. Unless the only answer that I have is that it really was Rav, and Rav chose not to exercise his I argue card. Once they bought the Braita, Rav said, I could argue, but I don't. And then Rav Nachman over here is a new piece. Okay, well let's carry on. Gemara says, Rav Nachman, I think that it's Malachi. I think Malachi is Ezra. And you're going to read this, you're going to get goosebumps. Dichtiv, because it says B'neviut Malachi. In one of the prophecies of Malachi, it writes, Ba'da Yehuda v'to'eva ne'esta b'Yisrael. Yehuda, they were rebellious. And a disaster, a to'eva, an abomination was done in Israel and Jerusalem. Ki chilel Yehuda kodesh Hashem, because Yehuda profaned the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Asher Ahev, that he loved in the past, Uba'al bat el nechar, and he had relations, he married the daughter of another god. Meaning that Malachi is saying that the Jewish people took for themselves goyot, non-Jewish wives, they were marrying, they had a problem of assimilation and intermarriage. You think to yourself, this issue that we're having now, it's like, oh, we never had this before. Rubbish. You see in the Pasuk, Malachi is saying that they were married to Goyim, to Goyot. Okay? Now, the Gemara says, so if Malachi is telling you about a problem with assimilation, with Jews marrying non-Jewish women, Uman Afrish Nashim Nachriyot, who made people get separated from their non-Jewish wives, who ran the anti-assimilation campaign that we know of in history, Ezra. Dichtiv, because it says, Vayan Shechanya ben Yechiel mebnei Elam. Shechanya son Yechiel said to who was one of the children of Elam, Vayomer le'Ezra, Anachnu ma'alnu be'Elohenu. We rebelled against our God, Vanoshev nashim nachriot, and we married these non-Jewish women. So you see that Ezra was pushing the people. You can't. What is this? We're building a Beit HaMikdash here. We're coming back from Galut. This is the way you behave. This is the marriages. These are the families you're building. So the Gemara indicated that if Malachi is describing this anti-assimilation campaign, and we have an opinion that says Malachi was Ezra, and we know that Ezra ran such a campaign, it must be that actually Malachi is Ezra, and then what we're talking about here is two people who are actually the same people. The Gemara now continues and expresses a wild Gemara, a strange Gemara, a Gemara perhaps very unique. Tanu Rabbanan. Arba nashim yefefiyot hayu ba'olam. There were 4 supermodels in the world. 4 women that were so beautiful that they put every other woman that is ever born, will ever be born, to shame. Who are they? Sarah, Abigail, Rahav, Esther. 4 women that were the most beautiful ever to live. Sarah, our great-great-great-grandmother, okay? Abigail, which was, as we mentioned, we already talked about Abigail, okay? Rachav, right? Remember what it says he saw her leg, and he was warmed by just that. David Amelech, Abigail, okay? Rahav, who was Rahav? Rahav was the innkeeper, okay? That Yehoshua ultimately married, who protected the 2 spies and made a commitment with them. Please don't kill me when you come in, okay? Rachav, the Esther, and finally Esther. These are the 4 most beautiful women in the world. Gemara says, what about the lizard? If Esther was greenish, according to that opinion that we brought before, that Esther had this greenish complexion, Gemara says, Mapik Esther, take Esther out, Umail Vashti, and you insert Vashti. I always felt this was very funny. 4 most beautiful women in the world ever lived, 3 of them are Jewish. Sorry, right? 4 of them are Jewish. And the Gemara says, okay, fine. Maybe one of them was not Jewish. So, if you think about the great, beautiful women in the world, you should think that all the most beautiful women are Jewish. Okay, the Gemara says...
Wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah?
Can you go back to see how we switched Esther to Vashti?
The Gemara says, according to the opinion that Esther was green,
Okay.
and the only reason why Hashverosh chose her in his supermodel search was because she had this chut shel chesed, she had some sort of divine gift that anyone that looked at her fell in love with her, okay? If that, like a siren, if that was the case, so she's not physically, naturally beautiful.
That's how they define greenish. What is greenish?
Greenish means she had like a green skin. Her skin was greenish in complexion.
Okay.
One would not imagine that that's something beautiful.
Yeah.
So the Gemara says, according to that opinion, Esther can't be on this list.
Uh-huh.
So the Gemara says the other answer is Vashti, right? Which actually, again, we know that Vashti was very beautiful.
Right.
Because that was the whole fight. Everyone's like, my women from my country, women from... Achashverosh is like, my wife's going to end this argument once and for all. Get her to come in here naked. She's going to end this argument. Everyone's gonna believe that my... That's a very confident man right there. That means that Vashti was actually, I don't know if she was the most beautiful that ever lived, but at least for sure in that generation, we have proof that she was considered, right? She was the most beautiful, all right? So, Rahav though was Gioret. So at least one of them came, according to all opinions, came from a non-Jewish origin, okay? The Gemara continues. Tanu Rabbanan. The Gemara is now going to explain how beautiful some of these women were, which again, is a strange Gemara, and one has to try and understand what in the world is the Gemara doing? Well, you're taking a break from Megillah to have a Miss Universe pageant, but of all times, like, okay guys, let's see who the next contestant is. Is that what's happening here? Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan. Rachav bishma zinta. A person mentioned Rachav's name already, they were filled with a sense of lust, of wanting to be with her. That's how powerful, how powerful her attractiveness was, that all you need to do was mention her name and people are losing their minds. Okay? Rachav bishma zinta. Yael bekola. Who's Yael? Yael is the woman. What?
Who's that?
Yael is the woman who kills Sisera. Who's that? In the time of the Devorah, the Nevi'ah Devorah, there's a general that's decimating the Jews. Cicero, exactly. This guy, he's killing everybody. And what does she do? Devor, excellent. Yes, the milk and the cheese. Talmid Chacham. Right? Beautiful. Ketonet Pasim moment. Beautiful. Now listen to this. What happens? He's running away. Yael says, come into the tent. I have a akil for you. Breakfast in the class. Let's go. Right? According to many other opinions, it wasn't breakfast in the class. She slept with him.
Yeah.
Right? But she lured him in,
Right.
gave him the milk and the cheese, and then when he was sleeping, she took the peg of the tent, boom.
We learned last week what
Into
she
his
did
head.
is against Judaism because she cheated on her husband.
On her husband.
So it goes against, I don't know the Hebrew. It's
Morality.
No, it's one of the commandments. You can't sleep with another. We can't go in. So what
Exactly.
she did for the sake of the nation is allowed because you're saving the whole nation.
Exactly.
Esther did the same thing.
And that's
Right,
the
that's
same.
what
And
they
that's
compared
what
to Yael and Esther.
that's what this Gemara is talking about.
But where does
Okay.
Yael come from? Why are we?
So Yael was married to Hakeni, okay, and the Gemara actually wonders about this because the pasuk says Minashim Yael Minashim Tiborach. Yael of women should be blessed, right? Yani of all women, we're going to bless Yael, and if what she did was inappropriate, was wrong, then we wouldn't say that about her. So the whole Gemara has a whole thing about these relations that Yael and Esther had that were against their will, but were for a greater good. Okay, yes.
Did Sarah sleep with Abimelech?
No, Avimelech would have loved to, but he wanted to, but the Malach, caused them to be unable to carry it out. All right. Now, Gemara says as follows.
Oh, she was down?
Sorry.
She was.
No, she was captured.
The Malach Grey Goose prevented that from happening.
Oh, okay.
I never heard that one, but okay.
Cut that out of there, man.
Yael Bikola. So Yael, her voice, she had a beautiful voice. So once she spoke to you, right, just the sound of her voice was enough for the person to go Majnun and throw everything away. Sisera at that moment, by the way, he's running for his life. But if he would have survived, he would have been able to regroup, right? Because he had that level of power and allegiance amongst the men and loyalty, right? But she lures him in, and she kills him. Avigail b'zechirata. With Avigail, remember we mentioned Avigail with David HaMelech, b'zechirata. All a person needed to do was remember her, and already they were filled with this, they were overcome with this lust. And Michal bat Shaul b'ri'iyata. And Michal bat Shaul had this effect on people, b'ri'iyata, when you saw her. Now, to me, it's very, very interesting, okay? That Michal, what it sounds like, each one of these has a different power over people, right? Some of them required proximal experience. So in other words, you had to see Michal in order for her to get the person to be so excited.
So usually it's a sense that turns you on.
So again, but that would be, in my opinion, that would be a lower level. Because with Rachav, you just mentioned her name, Chalas, the guy, she doesn't even need to be here. Yael needs her voice. So if Yael is not in the area, okay, you can remember Yael without going crazy.
Right.
But when it came to Rachav, and when it came to Abigail, even just the memory or the mentioning of their name was enough. Listen, the Gemara goes further. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak said Rachav had such an alluring element to her. Kol ha'omer Rachav, Rachav miyad nekri. The minute he just says her name twice, immediately the guy lets go of his seminal discharge. That's wild. This was the effect. It's very strange, right? But this was the effect that Rachav had on people. I think what we're trying to learn, we'll get to in 1 second to the end, and then I think we'll come back and explain all of this. Amale Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, he's playing a lot. He's a big player in today's Gemara. He said, "What are you talking about? Rachav. The guy loses he has a discharge. I mean Rachav lo echpitli. I'll say Rachav twice, no problem. Nothing's going to happen. Okay? Amale Rav Yitzchak said, no. Kika Amina. When did I say that they had this effect? Biyoda'al b'makira. If you knew her and you recognized her. Now, some commentators point out that the word yod'a, recognize, and the word makira, know, they seem to be the same. So yod'a, according to some commentators, Tosafot explains, yod'a doesn't mean he knew her. It means he knew her.
In the carnal sense.
Yes, like it says, Vayeda Adam et Chavashto, and Adam knew his wife. Okay, that means if once a person was with Rachav, according to Tosafot, that's what he's saying. That was at that point when. But the other opinion says no. It doesn't even without that. Even just to know her was enough to be able to bring this person to such a stage. Now, the reason why we're going into such a strange Gemara is because I think what the Gemara is pointing out is when you look at someone that has this level of an effect on people with their sexuality, with their physical appearance, when you see that person remains pure, even though they have this superpower, now it elevates the level of the sidkut, of the righteousness of that person when they did not use it. So as an example, we'd read earlier that one of the 4 most beautiful women was Sarah Imenu. But there's a wild pasuk. The pasuk tells us that when Sarah is traveling with her husband, the pasuk says, Abraham says to his wife, as he's getting close to Egypt, Ata yadati, now I know, ki isha yifat mare'at, that you are a beautiful woman. Everyone asks, what do you mean now you know? Now you know? You're married already for ages. The Gemara, the Chachamim give 2 explanations. One explanation is, I knew you were beautiful. But you ever see that? I remember there used to be a comedian, and she wrote a book. And the book is, it's time to go home when you look like your passport photo. Isn't that a great one? Right? You're traveling, you forgot, you're not made up, your hair's not done, you look your worst. So Abraham says to his wife, a woman is at her least beautiful when she's traveling. Now I'm traveling with you because we have to move because of the famine, and you're still so beautiful. I tell you that now I know that you're exceedingly beautiful because you maintained such a standard of beauty even when you're traveling. Which, by the way, turns from like a comment to such a romantic, beautiful one. Honey, even when you look everybody else, but look at you. You're radiant, even when we're traveling economy class down to Egypt while we're fasting. The famine is horrible, and look, you look amazing. That's one opinion. The second opinion is, it says he saw her appearance in a like a lake or a body of water, and he recognized. Now I know how beautiful you are. That's what he said to her. And the question is, but what was it different if he saw her in the lake or he saw her? So some want to say, oh, Abraham never saw her. That was the first time he saw her. But Judaism doesn't have a leave-in. You have your wife covered with a tablecloth. In fact, not only that, the halacha actually says in Masechet Kiddushin, the Gemara says, Asur la'adam. It is forbidden for a person to marry a woman ad shir'ena, until he sees her. So in the old times, you would send someone to go find you a good wife from a good family, from a good place. They would do that. But you had to at least see her once before you got married. So what's atayadati?
Lift the veil.
At least once.
Right.
So you see that there's a halachic obligation, which meant that Avraham could not have never seen her. So I said a pshat that I think is very beautiful. I said, when Avraham Avinu looked at Sarah, she was unbelievably beautiful, a beauty for the ages. But Avraham Avinu looked at his wife and he saw this unbelievable tzaddiket. He didn't see an object. He didn't see someone who was a physical specimen. He saw this unbelievable tzaddiket, who also had a beautiful gift amongst the many gifts, was that she was beautiful. That's not how he looked at her. He didn't see her that way. But for the first time in his life, as they were passing, he saw this reflection. He got to see his wife not in 3 dimensions, Yani, but in 2 dimensions. Just a flat picture, not the woman behind the woman, but just the image. He's traveling to Egypt and he thinks to himself, these Egyptians that are so immoral, what are they going to see when they see my wife? And he says, Atayadati, now I can see how the world would see you. Not how I see you, how the world would see you. Now listen carefully, because I think this is gorgeous. Now we're looking back and we're starting to understand what the Gemara is doing. The Gemara is explaining, the more beautiful Sarah is, the more beautiful is that sentiment in Abraham and Sarah, that he saw past Sheker Achen veHevel Hayofi Isha Yirat Amonait Tetarav. Interestingly enough, there's different opinions who Eshet Chayil was written about. One opinion is Shlomo HaMelech wrote Eshet Chayil about his mother, Bathsheba.
Oh.
The other opinion is it was written about Sarah.
By?
By Shlomo.
Oh.
Sheker Achen veHevel Hayofi. He says about the most beautiful woman in the world ever, beauty is not. Because when you have someone who has all of that, I always used to say this. I would tell the girls when I was teaching these teenage girls, a guy says that you're beautiful. That's like the smallest compliment he could give you. In fact, it should bother you if that's all a guy tells you. Because it's the one thing that you have that you didn't do. I mean, unless you're a plastic surgeon and operated on yourself. It's the one thing about you that you were born with.
Ozempic, what do you mean? It could change.
Yeah, that's just skinny. But if someone says you're beautiful, right? They're not noticing your brains. They're not noticing your midot. They're not noticing your accomplishments. They're not noticing, your maturity. They're not noticing the way you are with your family. Nothing else. A guy also tells you you're beautiful. Great, amazing. But if that's all he tells you, that should bother you. He's not noticing the person you are. He's noticing the person you were born as. Everything else you've done since then, he just crossed out with a red pen. Okay? So that's what the Gemara is coming to tell us. The more beautiful they were, the more we recognize the effect that they had on men, the more we realize that what they were doing was controlling that and not using it. And the interesting thing is, it says about Sarah, that Sarah lives 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. 7 years, when she was 20, she was as beautiful as when she was 7. And when she was 100, she was as pure from sin as a 20-year-old, because up till 20, a person is free from averot, so to speak, okay? At least with regards to for punishment, b'dei shamayim. So everyone asks the question, 20 and 7 sounds like a strange thing. What's more beautiful, a 20-year-old or a 7-year-old? And the answer, obviously a 20-year-old. The answer is though, but the beauty of a 7-year-old is completely and utterly innocent. The child doesn't use the beauty to get out of a parking ticket. They don't use the beauty to catch someone's attention, to flirt with someone, to get. It's not something that's manipulated or used or even noticed. It just is. That was the beauty that Sarah had, and now we're learning how beautiful. Okay, so that's a part of what the Gemara is expressing. The Gemara says, "Umordechai yada et kol asher na'asa," and Mordechai knew everything that had happened. What does that mean? Everything that happened, right? We'll see in a minute. He knows everything that's happened. He starts crying. He goes out to the street and he starts crying. Let's take a look at the pasuk in its entirety. Take a look at the notes on the side. Mordechai yada, first wide line at the end of the wide line in the Hebrew. Mordechai yada et kol asher na'asa, vayikra Mordechai et begadav, he rips his clothes, vayilbash sak va'efer, he wears sackcloth and ashes, ויצא בתוך העיר, he goes out into the city, ויזעק זעקה גדולה ומרה, and he screams a great and bitter cry. So what does this mean? What cry? What did he scream? What was this great and bitter cry? Rav says, Gava Haman me'achashverosh. He said, wow, the second in command, Haman, is more of a Baal Ga'ava, more Ge'eh, than Achashverosh. Achashverosh hates the Jews, as we learned earlier. But only Haman would suggest something that is so dastardly as the elimination of a people in one day. The second opinion, Shmuel, who is the natural combatant in halacha to Rav, Shmuel says, Gavar malka ila'a mi malkata ta'a. Wild. The upper king is stronger than the lower king. What is he really saying? As we said many times, people would say the tragedy should fall upon the enemies of the Jews. What are they really saying? Tragedy was falling on the Jews. But they didn't want to speak in a Lashon Hara type of a way, in an Ayin Hara type of way, so they just flipped the language. We see even the Egyptians did this. The Egyptians said, the Jewish people, what will happen? There will be someone that will declare war against us, ve'ala min haaretz, and they will leave the land. And everybody explains, it doesn't mean ve'ala, that they will leave, it means that they'll cause us to leave. But no one wants to say that about themselves. Mm-hmm. So Mordechai was saying something wild. The upper king has prevailed over the lower king. What was he really saying? The lower king has prevailed over the upper king. Look at this Hashem, these are Hashem's people. And look at the Gezerah that Achashverosh was able to do. That was he was screaming, crying in the streets.
Can I ask if Shemuel was the Navi?
Shmuel, no, different. That's
Different Shemuel.
Different Shemuel, yeah. A contemporary of Rav. Okay? Vatitchalchal hamalka, the Gemara says, Vatitchalchal, actually it has this kind of line, on the top of it. It means that she was extremely profoundly affected by finding that here she is living in the castle, in the palace, she has no idea. And Mordechai comes and tells her about this new decree that has just come out that nobody even knows about, breaking news. My vatitchalchal, and where do we get this, the translation? The word titchalchal, we say a very similar word, we say halulim, okay? In what's it called? In Asher Yasar, right? Halulim means the empty parts of a person's body. Vatitchalchal means, and she became, the empty parts of her body became gripped with fear and they became empty. What does that mean? The Gemara says there's two places in a woman's body that carry something that could then be, through fear, could then be released. One is that she experienced menstruation. She immediately began her period. And that's something that can happen to a woman from a tremendous amount of trauma, could affect their menstrual cycle, even instantaneously. And the second opinion is that she lost bodily control over herself. And the reason why we're communicating this is to illustrate the tremendous fear. And it's a crazy thing because we talk about Purim and we say Purim is the biggest almost. We almost got destroyed. But what happened to us? Nothing. Mm-hmm. Nothing happened at all. Mm-hmm. But the Gemara is trying to communicate, the Megillah indeed is trying to communicate that in that moment, the fate of the Jewish people hung in the balance to such a degree that look, even Esther was the queen. The fear was so overpowering. Vatikra Esther Hatach, and Esther called Hatach. Amar Rav. Rav says Hatach is Daniel. Hatach is Daniel. So Rav is again intervening in the you think his name is, but really his name is game. Okay, and he says Hatach is really Daniel. Why is he called Hatach? Shechatchu migdulato. Chatach and Hatach are very similar. Chet and He are always interchangeable. So shechatchu migdulato, they cut him from his gedulah. The Gemara is saying that Hatach, we'll see in a minute, is going to be someone who's Jewish. And which Jewish member do we know that is in the upper echelons of royalty? The only person that we know, other than Mordechai, which Hatach is not, is Daniel, because Daniel, remember, he was the writing on the wall guy. Daniel served Vashti's grandfather. So Daniel is in the palace of power all throughout this time. Okay? So the Rav says Hatach is actually...
Do they know he's Jewish?
I would think so. Because remember, he was the one who translated the writing on the wall, okay? Right. But Chatechu megdulato. Maybe that's why they cut him from his greatness, because they knew he was Jewish. They cut him down. Shmuel says, the reason why he's called Chatach is not because they cut him from his greatness, but rather everything that happened in the kingdom happened and was decided through him. So you have two parallel opposites. One opinion is that he was cut down from his Gedulah and nothing, he had no position of power. The other opinion is exactly the opposite. Chatach, he's the one that cuts, he's the final cut, on the decrees of the king. The Gemara continues. Ladat mazeh al mazeh. She says, let's just finish this last piece and then we'll end. Gemara says, Ladat, to know. She sends a message with Hatach to know what's going on here. Mazeh, what is this? Ve'al mazeh, and why is this? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak said, Shalecha lo. She sent him a message. Shema avru Yisrael chamisha chumshei Torah. Is the reason why this Gizerah is happening is because the Jewish people stopped keeping the 5 books of the Torah? Where do we see that was what she was saying? Because it says, when it comes to the luchot, mizeh u'mizeh hem ketuvim. The luchot were written, the letters went all the way through the stone from one side to the other. Mizeh u'mizeh hem ketuvim. So it was written straight through. We actually encountered this already in the beginning of Masechet Tani, where the Gemara said, of Megillah, the Gemara said, Man tzapach tzofim amarum. But if you remember, the letter mem is like a box. And that's how we knew that the letters of the luchot were a miracle. Because if it's engraved all the way through, that means that there's nothing holding the middle piece. So the middle piece is a miracle. It floated in its place as you held the luchot. So you're looking at the luchot, you can see the miracle in front of your very eyes. Okay? So since it's called mizeh u'mizeh ketuvim, so she was alluding to it when she said, Ladat mazeh ve'al mazeh. What is this and why is this? This, mizeh, is telling you the luchot, which symbolizes the 5 books of the Torah, because all of Torah is hidden in the luchot. So the Gemara says, she said to him, is that the reason why we're in this scenario? They said to Mordechai the words of Esther, Ihu lo azal legabe. Vayom vayagidu. It says, and they told. It doesn't say, and he told. So Hatach is the go-between. He sends, Hatach comes back, asks him a question, goes back to Esther. Esther comes in and says, I'm not going in. I can't go to the king. I haven't been called. I'm going to be killed if I go to the king without being invited. The Gemara says, "V'ilu lo azal." He himself did not go, and the reason why he did not go is because mikan we learn from here when something is terrible news, you don't volunteer to go do that information and let it go through somebody else. You should not be a person. Should never seek to be the bearer of bad news. Fascinating. Okay, so if there's another way to get that news to someone, don't let it come. Don't let it come from you. Okay? Chatach says to Esther, send the message another way that you're not going in.
On what level of that does that mean bad news? Is it like death, business? Like,
something.
I mean, it's
something very important. Not like they didn't have pistachio milk. Okay? So we're going to continue from here, Be'ezat Hashem, next week, and this is where we have this juicy sugya of what happened to Esther when she voluntarily went to Achashverosh. What happened to her marriage to Mordechai in this moment, and it's again a difficult passage to get through. Baruch Hanei